The Battle of Midway was one of the most decisive of World War II. The American victory destroyed Japan's ability to expand, and pushed Japan on the defensive until their eventual defeat. But what if Midway had turned out differently? What would have happened had the Americans lost, and been pushed back into a desperate situation against a rampant Japan? Today we will see how history could have been very different had Midway ended in a Japanese victory. This is Knowledge Voyage.
But before this video starts, don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you can get all of our weekly videos about history. Thank you.
The Battle of Midway was a turning point of World War II. Prior to then, Japan had been on the offensive and had seized impressive amounts of territory in record time. But at the Battle of Midway in 1942, Japan suffered a catastrophic defeat. In a single day, all 4 of Japan's aircraft carriers had been destroyed, and with them, thousands of experienced sailors and aviators. With these losses, Japan was pushed onto a permanent defensive standing, and plans to invade Hawaii, Alaska, and even the US West Coast had to be shelved. But what if Japan had won at Midway? What if instead of defeat, Japan had emerged the victor? The most likely outcome of a Japanese victory would have been a successful Japanese invasion of Midway Island, and after that, Hawaii. With Hawaii gone, the US Pacific Fleet would have lost the critical base of Pearl Harbor. The US would have been pushed onto the defensive, and fears of a Japanese invasion of the US West Coast would have reached fever pitch. This would have impacted on the Battle of the Atlantic. The Americans had allowed the British to use some US ships to escort convoys across U-boat infested waters. In the event of a Japanese win at Midway, the political pressure in America to use US ships to defend the US West Coast would have been overwhelming. With US ships pulled out of the Atlantic, it would have placed extra pressure on the British to protect their own convoys, something the British Navy were already straining to do. It cannot be ruled out that this may have ended in a British defeat, and with it, a peace treaty with Germany. A Japanese victory at Midway would have also caused further suffering for the subject peoples of Japan's empire in Asia. Without an intact navy, the US would not have been able to sweep across the Pacific and liberate these countries in island-hopping operations, as in our timeline. That said, there are counter-arguments to these alternatives. For starters, it is unlikely the Japanese would have invaded the west coast of America. Japan's primary strategic interests were in Asia, not North America. Admiral Yamamoto had also famously cautioned that, with the high gun ownership rate in America, Japan would be facing an endless insurgency with, quote, a rifle behind every blade of grass. Furthermore, the US proved in our timeline that it could rapidly rebuild and rearm. Even if the US loses at Midway, the factories and shipyards of America could quickly rebuild the losses, as the arsenal of democracy. As a result, the US could have regrouped and then gone on the offensive again, although probably slightly later than in our timeline. As for the Atlantic, whilst US ships being withdrawn would have been a problem, it may not have been a death blow. British code breakers at Bletchley Park had unravelled the U-boat code, so could steer convoys around U-boats better. British air power and anti-submarine devices in the Atlantic were also improving. So even if the US did withdraw from the Atlantic after a Japanese win at Midway, it may not have been the end for the UK. But whatever may have happened with a Japanese win at Midway, it is worth remembering just how critical a win for the Allies Midway was in our timeline, and it is very worrying to think what may have happened had Japan won.
Thanks for watching everyone, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.